So I'm from Greenville originally. Grew up on Paris Mountain. Literally, when I was 5 years old, looked down at Furman with my identical twin brother, and we said that we wanted to go to Furman, go to medical school, and come back to Greenville, which is what happened. And when I was in Charleston in training, I met my wife Sherry, and we moved back to Greenville and have been in Greenville for 35, back in Greenville for 35 years. We were fortunate enough to have three kids, McKee, Katie, and Chaz, and they were all a delight growing up, and we had literally no problems with them through middle school, high school. I mean, they weren't perfect, but they were good kids. So our story with our youngest son, Chaz, related to drugs and addiction. When he was in high school, he might have drank a little bit the end of his senior year in the college, the summer before he went off to college, but he never used drugs. And so we did what we with our youngest son, the same as we did with our oldest son and daughter, that they both went to Clemson, um, did great, not just survived, but thrived at Clemson. So when it was time for Chaz to go off to school, he, of course, chose Clemson because his siblings had been there. And we had no reason to believe that his story at Clemson would be any different than his older siblings, that we thought he would be successful and launch successfully in adulthood. It was during his sophomore year that we first realized, or that we first learned, that he was using marijuana. And perhaps due to our naivete or ignorance, we did not uh, realize that this could be a harbinger of things to come. So the time when we first realized there was a problem was literally not until his senior year. So we went from his sophomore year, where we knew he was using marijuana, to his senior year, when he came home and told us that he thought he was dropping out of school. And when I asked him why, he said that he could not focus and couldn't sleep and felt like he needed a break from school. And at the time, my initial thought, honestly, was kind of what the hell, because I had no clue as to why he wanted to take a medical leave from Clemson. Um, and then when he got up to leave this room, is when he was a little bit upset how I had responded, and he put his fist through the wall. And so it was that exact moment where we knew we had a problem. We didn't know what the problem was at that point, but we knew we had a big problem. In a short period of time, a matter of weeks, we talked to some of his friends and were just trying to figure out what was going on. And it became apparent. We learned that he indeed had a problem with drugs. And unfortunately, at that point in time, because it had been going on since his freshman year, um, he had not only gone from experimental usage to recreational to problematic usage to substance use disorder, and in fact, met the criteria for having a severe substance use disorder, which is, of course, addiction. So that was his senior year. He did take a medical withdrawal from school. Um, of course, at the time, we were totally blown away, shocked as to how he could have a problem, because neither my wife nor I happened to even drink. We didn't have alcohol in the house. We had always warned our kids about alcoholism because there was a family history of alcoholism, but we I I didn't talk to them about drugs, and Sherry says she talked to them a little bit, but basically we didn't have any big conversations or any ongoing conversations about drugs, because we just did not think that was even possible that any of our kids would use drugs. So, like I said, it was a real shocker, and the question became, what did we do to get Chaz help? And fortunately, Greenville does have a number of uh, uh, opportunities to get help and to learn about addiction and so forth. So Chaz ended up, long story short, going out of town to rehab, and then he came back to town, and then he went through different rehabs and so forth. And he did well at times. At one time, he got 5 months sober, and another time, he got 15 months sober. But it was definitely a little bit of a roller coaster up and down. And it just speaks to, in my opinion, the power of addiction. Addiction is very, very powerful. Um, and that's why I'm a firm believer that prevention is the key, because if you don't start it, you don't have to stop it. And if it's not prevention, certainly early intervention is the key. And for us, um, we went from his sophomore year, where he was using marijuana, to his senior year before we knew there was a problem. And obviously, he had gone on to use other drugs. And so we missed out on the early intervention opportunity. And like I said, by the time we realized there was a problem, then the cat was out of the bag, so to speak. And I believe that addiction is so powerful, and we got to see firsthand the power of addiction, and how it really is truly a disease of the brain. Meaning, don't get me wrong, people make bad choices at the beginning, and then you get into it, and then in a certain percentage of people, they go on to, might go on to addiction. And you never know before you use a drug whether or not you're going to be one of those people. You have a choice as to whether or not you use drugs, but you don't have a choice as to how your brain reacts. And so the truth is, Chaz was one of the 10 to 15% of people, like college students, that go on to have a problem once you use, because most people in college, for instance, use and they're able to walk away from the drugs, whereas Chaz was not able to do that. And so, it clearly is a disease, um, where the reward system of your brain gets hijacked, the thinking part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex is not as functioning like it should. And so really, the person gets to the point where they they think their priority is using drugs more than anything else. And we got to see that firsthand. And that doesn't mean that Chaz didn't love us, cared for us. None of it was personal towards us, but his brain had taken over, such that the thing that he needed to do was to use drugs to survive. So and unfortunately, in this day and age, even at the time when Chaz passed away, when he took a counterfeit Xanax that contained uh, fentanyl, he was actually doing pretty well. He was not, as they say, he was not in the deep throes of addiction. He was uh, had just gotten a promotion at work. He was doing pretty well, but he took the one pill that contained fentanyl. And unfortunately, in this day and age, it's like playing Russian roulette. You can't take any drugs that didn't come from your doctor or the pharmacy, and it's just awful. And my opinion is, while Chaz made mistakes in terms of using drugs, and he got addicted, which partly was due to genetics. So that wasn't his fault. You can't control your genetics. But addiction or no addiction, nobody deserves to die from taking one pill that has fentanyl in it. Um, so we, my wife and I, it was something that we never thought could happen to us. Why would you think it would? And so I do think, because it's hard to deal with the supply of drugs, you can try to deal with the demand of drugs, which is where prevention comes in. That if you don't have people that are buying them, the demand will maybe drop. The demand dries up, the supply might dry up. But the answer is to try to nip it in the bud before somebody gets addicted, because uh, once somebody gets addicted, it's not like if somebody just lost their job and they've got to deal with one issue of finding a job. Once somebody gets addicted, then it's so complex that they might have a problem with maintaining a job, or with money, or relationships, and so forth and so on. So it really is like being in a black hole. And to get out, I admire anybody that can be in the throes of addiction and go on to do well. And to me, that I believe is kind of related to the spiritual aspect of addiction, in my opinion, meaning that addiction is so powerful. And I think it's only by the grace of God that anybody gets out of the deep throes of addiction.